Good morning, everybody. And I'm just going to try and make a few observations, but then leave some time for Q&A, partly because I'm not sure I've got anything terribly interesting to fill a half an hour, but also because I think in the audience we've probably got sort of a mixture of some of Europe's best cross-channel sort of multi-channel talent. So I'd be interested in some of your points of view. So I'm going to make a few points really from the perspective of somebody who is now looking at this question, particularly from a CEO point of view, on investment priorities, people priorities. How do you think about this from a traditional retailer point of view? But I'm also thinking about it from someone who spent 3 very, very painful and exciting years between 2000 and 2003 as head of e-commerce for Kingfisher at the time when I was feeling very stupid when everyone had valuations of X trillion for something that sold sort of £3,000 last week. And it's very interesting to see the way the customer has finally judged the winners and losers, albeit 10 years later. And I think some of the lessons from that early pioneer phase of e-commerce still actually apply. And what's really irritating, some of the ideas we saw back in 2000 now finally make sense when you've got the bandwidth and the devices to make it happen. So there's maybe not new things invented under the sun, but from a sort of CEO point of view, I suppose I wanted to make sort of share really what some of the constraints and the challenges that we see for us as an organisation. So if I just sort of start with point 1, which is that we're looking at probably 4 big challenges ahead for us as a multi-channel retailer, and we are now a multi-channel retailer. And those challenges probably thematically play out in most places, more or less the same themes for different ways. But one of the starting points that's different for us is that we are, relatively speaking, a late developer. We have £10.5 billion in sales and very little sort of sub sort of realistically 250 million actually transacting online. However, we're already multi-channel because over 65% of our customers are doing research before they come to the store. So we live in a multi-channel reality. And the challenge for us is to figure out how to do it. But transactionally, the classic model of sell stuff online, deliver it to home hasn't really worked. We did sell a lot of laminate flooring, and we lost a shed load of money delivering it. We didn't sell any paint. We spent an enormous time building this beautiful application to try and show you how to design your room in multiple shades of our colours paints, and then sold no paint. We sold some tester pots, which is a good way of getting people into store, but realistically, don't try and deliver paint through courier systems. I would advise you against it. And then the third bit was sort of tools, which we thought would be more straightforward. And to some extent it was, but then we found out quite quickly you've got a sort of one-hit promotional shopper who is essentially using price comparison engines and increasingly probably Amazon, although interestingly they're not as price competitive as one might have thought. But those became sort of single siloed products rather than, if you like, a generic offer. Because a lot of home improvement projects, frankly, are really difficult to do from a purchase point of view through the web. You simply have to do a certain amount of look and show. You have to really get your hands on certain elements of it, and there's a high degree of complexity. You've got up to sort of 5,000 SKUs in a kitchen project. It's very difficult to assemble some of that stuff online. And also it's sequence. You quite often need to do some work, first fix, and then second fix. And what it does lend itself increasingly is a way of thinking and researching and getting inspiration and talking to people about projects, but actually you'll probably do quite a lot of your transactions somewhere else. So we're, relatively speaking, a late developer, relatively underpenetrated, but we do have a couple of great assets, one of which is Screwfix, which we originally bought back in '99. I say that because I was the person that bought it, would therefore like to take the credit for it. But what we did notice there was a great platform on which we've continued to build, which is now quite clearly the leading transactional site in the UK in this area, but has now developed into a truly multi-channel player, from being a catalogue to catalogue plus internet to now over 150 trade counters around the country. And alongside that, DIY.com in the UK and Castorama.fr in France are the most visited DIY home improvement sites in the UK and France. So we're very much in there, but this for us is still early days because actually relative to, say, my experience of being involved in Comet, where electricals has been penetrated, and then to more extreme cases like obviously music and film, this is still relatively low levels of transactional activity. And to some extent, that gives us an opportunity because we can see some patterns evolving in other areas which hopefully we can learn from. But the 4 challenges I want to talk about were basically, firstly, the challenge of rethinking your business model. We have got a pretty sort of solid 1970s starting point here, which is people watch TV, they see an advert, 30-second on TV, they then decide to talk about a product, they go and research it in the store, they think about it, they come back the next day in their car, and then probably they buy it and they bring it home. Pretty well all points of that model are under threat one way or the other now, not least because the channel which you're reaching people through has changed, the cost of the land, the cost of getting out to those places, and increasingly the type of way people make decisions have all changed. So we start from a worldwide portfolio of 840 stores, large amounts of tin around the world, mostly in Europe but also in China, with very differing market dynamics and a very clear message that everything will change. It's just not entirely clear yet how. And what we've seen is the first phases of our business model changing. So click and collect has come in. It only took me about 5 years, I think, as CEO to get that to happen. So indication of some of the challenges in big company, large-scale change to make it happen. And click and collect is now bigger than certainly our B&Q home delivery. So in that sense, we follow the Argos model as click and collect is probably the key challenge. Because actually it's more convenient for customers. They don't want to wait at home unless you can get to very, very precise time deliveries. Actually, that is more convenient, and people have certainty of shop. They don't want to waste time. And at that point, for us, it's great because we get higher ATV, we can upsell, and there are accessorized options. So it's a great development from the traditional pure retail discovery model. And yes, there is home delivery, but actually the bigger move, I think, over the next sort of 5 to 10 years will be to work out what your business model does at which part. So the research part will move out of the store and into some form of online or community forum. People will do their thinking and dreaming in other places. And the challenge for us as retailers, as brands, is to make sure that we don't get, frankly, cut out of that loop by our friends, say, at Google or elsewhere, who can take the value-added part of it and reduce the retailer to being simply a functional, commoditized delivery point of frankly, widely available product. So it's made us think about the first part of the business model. How do you attract people? How do you engage people? So things like creating fora, allowing places for people to have discussions, normal things, product reviews. All of that is increasingly changing the retailer's model from I make money by selling stuff to you to I create a place where you can do the things you want and provide a solution. But increasingly, you're having to go further back into the sort of attract and inspire part of the purchase as opposed to just showing up with, I've got some product for you at the end. And so things like the Screwfix Forum are incredibly important. And for us, as challenge for us as big retailers is you get emerging players like MyDeco, Brent Hoberman's outfit, who are potentially providing another place where the customers are having those conversations or getting those ideas. And we have to compete now in a very different way than simply saying, well, we've got an ad on telly for mowers this weekend, and that's the job done. The other thing I'd say about the change in the business model is we are going to have to think about, do we have to go further into services? Do we have to provide, certainly, obviously, more in the way of content? And I'll come back to content in a minute. But the sort of dynamics for what really works from a customer point of view become different when a customer is researching multi-channel, talking to their friends, and you have to be engaged with them all the way down the points of that conversation. So you can't simply wait to show up for them to show up in store. So investing in being present on social media, investing in understanding what people are saying to you, and then investing in a way of reaching out to them is a set of costs that perhaps a traditional finance director wouldn't be desperately comfortable with in a retail setup. But it is part of this evolving business model. And I think you have to then take a very different look at a retail model which has traditionally been very much, we can measure the things we sell, and we're very product-focused, to much more a customer-based model. And for us, having Screwfix in the group is a fantastic advantage because it starts with the customer in the database, builds back to product. And I think increasingly retailers are going to have to adjust their business model in their heads, which is not what were my top 10 products last week, but it's what were my top 10 customers doing last week. And I think that is, when we talk about adjusting business models at a fundamental level, many retailers are very, very product fixated still, and they don't get the customer piece. So for us, investing in our customer database, investing in a customer office at B&Q is very much part of our future development. So moving on to the second challenge, lining up the plumbing. This is not another shameless plug for DIY, but what that really is the problem for big retailers of our scale. And B&Q in the UK is 4 billion in sales and a very small sum in sort of online transactional. So you've got this really big beast, and it doesn't really respond well to being told what to do by this sort of small tail. But we know to future-proof the business, that's what we're going to have to do, because unless we can present one integrated view of product and transactions and orders to customers and allow them to access that anywhere, literally, on any device pretty well, either in-store, out of store, or share it with friends, ultimately we're not going to be one of the leaders. The problem for most retailers is that no one dreamt when they were building legacy systems and SAP and the rest of it in the early 80s, 90s, that that's what would be necessary. So there was no need to worry about, well, can the system that I've created to order and define kitchens, which has got a lovely front end with great sort of CAD graphics, and then quite a clever link to a SKU ordering device, but in an incredibly clunky sort of 1980s way, suddenly I want to share that with my customers. And then suddenly you find this doesn't work and you can't track the order. And it's not to do with the glossy front end. I mean, you can put up a front end or an app incredibly quickly and everyone goes, ooh, ah. But they're vanity apps, basically. It's not real. Unless the customer can actually do something substantial with it, it is ultimately something that will be found out. And the heavy lifting that has to go on inside large organizations to actually reorient the system so you get one view of product, one view of activity is fundamental. We're announcing today a £35 million investment in B&Q alone in the UK. Now, that hopefully will provide a platform for other bits of the group, but that will be between today and 2013 to, in essence, replace all our special ordering, kitchen ordering systems and then reconnect everything in a way that allows us to basically interconnect with the client in a really seamless way. And the fun front bit of it will become partly visible, but actually it will take us more or less 2 years of solid systems re-engineering just to get to that point. And that does create some interesting issues because there is an issue of scale, so the big guys can afford this stuff. Yes, we will move more slowly than a nimble player, but we'll have more substance behind what we can do because we actually deliver real things. And secondly, I think it raises the stakes for international groups. And we are 40% UK, 40% France, 20% rest of the world. What we're doing in a number of areas is engineering a sort of lead business to take the sort of solution work and then make sure it's replicable across the rest of the group. So our cost to go into the next country will be significantly lower, having done the work either here or in France. So for us, we're increasingly seeing this as an opportunity, which is, yes, it's a complete pain in the backside to have to do all this, but if we do it right, we create possibly more of a barrier to entry for other people than, say, another shop or another set of product ranges. So it is fundamental. It's very unglamorous, but if you don't line up the plumbing, you basically won't get a chance to play. Third challenge is how do you become a publisher? And a lot of us in value retail, mass market retail, we are very much out of the culture of pilot high, sell it cheap. We know what customers want. We're very, very keen just to sort of get after the sale. So people in traditional retail parlance, sort of classic hairy-ass retailer, looking at someone wafting around creating content, instinctively distrusts, instinctively thinks this person's a waste of time, money, and effort. So trying to get people to engage with the idea that actually content is critical to you having a customer to whom you can sell stuff is quite a big evolution. And typically the skills are not inside most retail organizations. So trying to graft onto an existing trading and commercial and ops structure, a really good content creator, and keep them linked up. As Matt was saying, one of the things you're trying to find here is you're introducing very different bits of DNA into big organizations, and that's fine, except the existing DNA has a habit of killing new DNA when it comes in. So there is a massive tissue rejection sort of reflex in most organizations. So if you don't get this right, you'll have 6 months of great stuff before the content director flounces out in tears and sort of says they're all brutes. The reality is, I think you have to sort of explain to people, actually, this is now the way we're selling to people. We are selling by giving them the how-to guide. So this is B&Q, and then a great example from France, the weekend castoche. And castoche is a pun on fastoche, which is easy in French, sort of simples in French, with Castorama. So it's sort of it's our proprietary, it's easy. And the idea is that on the website, you've got weekend projects. So you say, have you got half a day, 1 day, 2 days, or have you got a weekend? Here's the projects you can do. This is how you do it. This is all the things you'll need. And that essentially is a publishing activity, but it's very geared towards then selling. And obviously it links in to the product references we've got. But the effort and the time and the money to actually create all that, create the how-to guides, create the videos which are now on YouTube, are really, really, not traditional retail reflexes. And I think they will take quite a lot of work to keep publishing them in. So, Screwfix now is I think, is in one of the top 2 or 3 commercial YouTube channels. And that is a deliberate attempt to say that we will own the content space around here. We want to be the traffic location for any questions around DIY and home improvement, because the more we do that, the more we become the natural home. But you have to do it in a sort of subtler way than just saying, gosh, you've come here, now I can sell you something. And that reflex for retailers is quite a difficult one to overcome. But the fourth and final challenge at this point is how do you take big organizations and figure out how to test at speed? And this whole question of how fast you go with investments is a big problem, certainly for PLC boards, who can sort of see a very quick way of spending a lot of money, not necessarily getting anything back. Speaking personally as somebody who wasted, technically in hindsight, quite a lot of money on WAP applications in 2001 and 2, which couldn't work because the phones just couldn't go fast enough to make you do anything useful. I can see the sort of same worry that says, great, we've got this platform, now we'll do this stuff in Android, we'll do it for the iPhone, it'll all be fantastic, and then you'll find, 2 years later, you'll be blindsided by another application that's come out. The speed at which something like Facebook or Twitter has emerged to volume is genuinely, I think, different. And if I had to contrast the experience in 2000 to 2011, it's that the volumes are now seriously mass market. And, for example, Screwfix launched its iPhone app. It was, I think, a year ago, and we got 1% of our sort of order traffic came through that. This year, it's over 10% in 1 year. That shift is extraordinarily rapid. And the fact that builders are using smartphones, again, 15 years ago, I wouldn't necessarily have predicted that rate of uptake. But what we're seeing now is that speed creating a real challenge for big structured organizations, because they have to make big scale bets. And it's the big difference between being a small, nimble online retailer and having a mass market cross-channel brand, because people know you from the bricks and mortar. They expect a certain level of performance when they go online. And if you don't get that right, you are in frankly, big trouble. And so for us, I think the message is, test at speed and keep evolving. So the 2 iPhones, I should have really brought a Google Android application, but I apologize for that. But the two applications there were deliberate decisions to say, right, let's get the quick and dirty up as soon as we can to start learning, and then plan a fairly rapid sort of development plan for sort of versions 2, 3, 4, 5, particularly linked to what we could do to, going back to my earlier point about lining up the plumbing. Which bits of this could we connect to useful things for customer in the core systems? And it's typically the middleware on linking to the systems that determines your speed. It's not being able to write fun apps. And that's the bit where we're sort of trying to work out at the moment is, okay, where do we invest? The 35 million we've invested in the UK around this next program, Multichannel, is really to give us the building blocks. And it's a deliberate attempt to sort of invest, go slow, and then go much faster later. But the uncertainty about, well, which particular solutions are going to work, which ones are really important, is a big challenge. And I think as a result, people are going to make slightly safer bets. They won't go for everything. But I think it is clear there are some emerging trends, notably on mobile, as Matt said. I think having been a false prophet on mobile in 2001, I genuinely think the time has come, because this has gone now into real consumers' hands as opposed to a few techies. So we are going to sort of double up on that and on our ability to generate and share content, which is quite clearly also going to be a crucial piece. But on the whole, I would say boards hate spending money on IT because everyone on the board has been there for more than 10 or 15 years, has got their own bit of scar tissue about they were promised this and it was this and it cost that. So be very careful when you go for your CapEx requests, because you've got a cynical bunch at that level. The last thing I want to say was I think this is the most interesting time to be involved in multi-channel, because it's now, for want of a better phrase, it's now a proper business. This is something that's gone from being very interesting early adopters stuff. This is now core customers, and most retailers are slightly behind the curve on that, because they will always react a little bit late on it. But for the people that can get ahead now, there is genuine opportunity, I think, to build leadership businesses. And it's about the subtlety of understanding how the various channels lined up. Because for me, in our sector anyway, it's quite clear customers have said they prefer the real-world brands to be their main point of contact. They'll look at all the other people. They'll look at a great site, made.com, really interesting stuff. There's all sorts of interesting sort of specialists out there. And they will use certain other sites for specific points. So we've launched at Screwfix jobsorted.com, which is a way of connecting tradesmen with their customers. We've got all the tradesmen anyway because we've got them at Screwfix and TradePoint. So we're connecting them and giving them work from our customers, who we've also got the customers. Both people like it. For us, those sorts of things are things you could not do in a real-world bricks and mortar environment. You can do with the multi-channel. But it's about trying to figure out the totality of the brand promise, I think, across all those channels. And what is it you get by the unique combination of channels? So simply replicating stuff you can do in either place, we haven't got enough time, bandwidth, or money to do that. So intelligently working out what's the value add and how do you help a customer navigate through a multi-channel experience with complete consistency and transparency still remains, job to be done with us, but a huge opportunity. So for us, just to finish, multi-channel is one of our sort of 4 key priorities of the next 5-year strategic cycle that we're about to set out on. And for us, because we are a late developer, as I said, relative to other sectors, we think we've got a huge amount of upside. And because we are Europe's leader and number 3 in the world, we think we can invest more aggressively than other people can to really drive that. So we are absolutely going on this journey. And as a Franco-Britannic company, I really applaud the original suggestion by Matt to making it cross-channel, because we actually see this as a multi-market international opportunity, not just the UK. So that was the end of the quick rant. I think we've got 5 or 6 minutes if anyone would like to ask any questions. And this is the point where you can go into stun science. I think there are a couple of microphones if anyone would like to. Yep, the back there.
Hi, yeah, you talk a lot about...
Could you just say, just for about who you are?
I'm Andy Wolf from O2 in the UK. Right. I was kind of interested in what you said about the systems integration challenge. But more importantly, what do you think the organisational implications are for the business? Because actually the cultural challenge of providing that consistent experience cross-channel is probably a lot harder than just the systems integration challenge.
Yeah, absolutely right. I think there's 2 levels of challenge. I think, and it may sound an odd way of answering it, I think until you've got the systems up to a level where they can work, you can't actually change the organisation, because the organisation will stay in its pre-existing silos, and it won't see any reason to change until actually we're interacting with the customer differently, because we've now got the systems lined up to do it. And I think what we'll see is in retailers anyway, is a critical element between commercial, marketing, and ops, and deciding how do we run this store. And I think the 3 elements are, 1, everyone has to become multi-channel retailer. This point about, you don't have people in silos anymore. It's part of the core skill set. So if you've got a commercial director that doesn't understand multi-channel, they're not going to last very long. Equally, the ops guys need to understand how multi-channel affects their stores. And that I think has moved probably quite a long way. But the final bit is in marketing. And I think there is a degree to which retail marketeers can get stuck on, I want to be famous for my 30-second ad. And they don't quite get the point of, actually, I'm now trying to build customer databases. I'm trying to build value in my lifetime value in my customer. And I think it's about the CEO basically welding those 3 together. And every company will probably find the organisation slightly differently. But unless you get all those 3 effectively get infected and understand it, it will never quite work, whatever organisation you put into play. Any other? Oh, sorry. Yep. Oh, no, not Michael. He knows more than anyone else in the room. That's unfair.
A simple question. Simple question. In a world where going online to buy Black & Decker, Power Drill, as you said, is a sort of price comparison activity, how important is developing own brands in this sort of battle?
That's very helpful. Michael reminded me of the 3 points I failed to mention in my speech because I wasn't here. Very, very critical. I mean, our average big box store is 45,000 SKUs. We're in an odd position whereby we don't have as many KVIs as someone like Comet would, where you've got Sony flat screen as a Sony flat screen. But we are deliberately upweighting our own brand efforts to try and segment away from simple price comparison sites and then advanced price comparison sites, because I think ultimately if all you do is end up offering other people's products. One of the things the internet brings through transparency is margin erosion and commoditization. And we have therefore also said that going back to our four themes for growth, one of the other ones is going to be about innovation. And I think retailers are going to have to be much more innovative in their product development and actually most aspects of the business, but particularly product, because the transparency and availability of product to customers has just been completely changed on any dimension. So if all you're offering is someone else's product at pretty well the same price, there's not a lot of reason for you to be there. If you can bring own label, innovative products, exclusive products, then then literally the world is your oyster. And I think what's very interesting is seeing some of the niche brands in areas like fashion in particular exploiting the internet to a worldwide audience in a way that they could never have done. Or not so much fashion brands, just exclusive. So worked a lot with Johnny Bowden in the early years of Bowden, and the internet has allowed him to go to the US in a way that he could simply not have done and build a business around the world on what's essentially a narrow niche but multiplied across multiple countries. So I think if you're not developing own label, if you're not developing exclusivity, I think you'll find a big degree of challenge. And the other thing is the cycle time on products will get faster because people will see it quicker, learn about it quicker, use it, get bored, move on to the next thing. So I think the general development of the internet is going to push up the requirement for innovation, and we're certainly going to be investing heavily in that capability. Any other? There's one helpfully in the middle, so someone has to clamber all over somebody or pass the microphone down. Sorry, so here you are.
I'm Jonathan Liebenhaus, somewhat less pointy-headed economist from London School of Economics.
Right.
I'm curious about the CapEx investment, or in particular, the alternatives to CapEx, and the extent to which you are going to be able to accelerate some of the variety of activities you're doing using cloud services or other kinds of rapid and less cap-intensive investments.
I think there are an awful lot of finance directors around the world praying for cloud services to emerge quickly to avoid the need for large lumps. The two comments I make, one is we are still, from an enterprise reliability level, some way away from being comfortable about putting other than raw computing transactional capability up on the cloud. In terms of getting the sort of software development we're doing at the moment and this big lump we're creating, it is so much more about the interconnection and the sort of rearranging of an existing set of processes that you have to be very close to the set of processes to really make it work. I think what we are seeing is chunks of, I suppose, the initial chunks going on to sort of cloud will be some of the commoditized things. So could we run payroll? Yeah, absolutely. That can go. That can be outsourced. Could we do the content management that we need to do in our business on a cloud platform? Ultimately, yes. Right now, we haven't even got the right sort of application. So we're at probably a stage or two before that, before we start seeing it come. But the main issue on CapEx has really been the cost of developing applications. And until you find ways of standardizing that or speeding that up, it's going to remain difficult. And you're already seeing people move their development platform, some of the application work to India. That's one step, but I think it's still only one step. So it's still going to be, they're still going to remain pretty expensive bets for the next 5 years, I think. Okay, any other? We've got one just here, yeah.
I can shout out if that's fine rather than wait.
You've got a travelling mic heading your way.
Hello, I'm Matthew Entwistle and I work for Tesco.
Right.
So you talked a little bit about your business and your Asian business. Asia moves in a slightly different way and doesn't always follow the same trends that the UK or France is following. So how do you, as a business with a strong Western European core, make sure that you're keeping account of what's going on in China and their technologies and their ways of working?
Good question. I mean, first of all, China is fundamentally different. For a home improvement player, there are two really important things. Firstly, there is no DIY at all in China. If you can afford to buy a product, you can actually afford to get a migrant worker to put it in. So DIY project involves possibly changing a light bulb. And we actually did a test on the floor of the commercial department of B&Q in Shanghai. Hands up amongst 200 people, who owns any power tools? and out of 200 we had 2, of which one was a Brit and one was a Frenchman. So it's not really the same market. So we've had to completely readapt the model there. And we also had a slight problem 3 or 4 years ago when we got into effectively renting our space out to our suppliers. We weren't actually really retailing. So we've gone through a big sort of rework to get back to, well, what's the Chinese customer want, and very much what can we do with own label to break away from the suppliers. And we're now back to, should make profit this year, and that gives us now a platform to go forward. And the 2 observations on China I'd make. One is, it is essentially, for us, a middle-class market. In some ways, almost more upmarket relative to the total population than our UK customer. So we have to think slightly differently about how does that customer want to be used. But what it does do is give us a great opportunity with the internet, because they're very, very internet savvy. A lot of content, not so much in the way of transactions in our experience yet, because the product set we're in is quite sort of touch and feel, and it's a different dynamic, but it will come. But the key thing for us is developing content and community online in China. And I think when you see the growth of places like, you know, the Alibaba and the various other search engines in China, there is a massive activity despite some of the government issues, odd Google issue or 3 with being in China. But I think you have to sort of say, from our experience, as opposed to, say, Russia, which we feel is our market there is much closer to our European market, China is so fundamentally different, you have to completely start again. So we went right back to basics, and we've built it back from the consumer research back up. And multi-channel there will play a more important role in the next couple of years, but we haven't really probably scratched the surface. But yeah, completely different. I'm sorry, there was one other question I think I saw. No? In which case, I think we are out, actually. So thank you very much for your time. Thanks very much.